afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak here as we prepare for Canada's 150th birthday party. Merci pour votre invitation. Ang maluhay ko yaw si magiamilit sino nakoksapunga hoyan namir sungalo. As I was introduced, I am Mary Simon, the president of the Inuit Tepirik Kanatami, which is the national organization representing the Inuit of Canada, in particularly 4 regions called Inuit Nunangat. I'm from northern Quebec, Arctic Quebec, a place known as Nunavik, in the small village of Kangersualujjuaq on the western shore of Ungava Bay. And I'm giving you a little bit of background so that when I start to talk about the future, there'll be a bit of context to what I'm saying. My mother was an Inuk. Inuk is singular for Inuit. And my father was from the south, living in the Arctic, managing the Hudson Bay Company post where they used to trade furs during those years. And I spent my adolescence in the north living a very traditional lifestyle. We camped and we hunted and gathered food, made our own clothes, and most importantly, maintained an active connection with our heritage and language. When I was born in the 1940s, we were still living much as we did 150 years before that. But as you probably know by now, so much has changed. It was at this time governments discovered us beginning sort of a very emotional and turmoil period in our history. We call that the colonial period. We were moved off the land to central communities. Whole families were moved, relocated far from their traditional hunting grounds. And that was the same time that children were taken away to residential schools and parents to TB hospitals or tuberculosis hospitals or sanitariums, some never to return. And this period in our life has some true horror stories. It was during this period that many other social pressures converged in the north, as they did earlier in the rest of Aboriginal Canada. I don't understand all the root causes, but suffice to say that Inuit society began to experience very serious and chronic problems associated with alcohol, substance abuse, youth suicide, violence against women, and generally family breakdown. It became quite clear that our communities and our families, our culture, was in deep trouble. Our social fabric, the power of our traditions, was in question. Young people were becoming alienated from their parents and elders. Traditional skills were becoming less respected. The pull of the South, with all of its telecommunications and material goods, was compelling. Role models were changing, education systems confusing, and most frightening was the undermining of family values. During this period, I have lost many friends and colleagues along the way. And this is why we say things have to change. I've been president of this organization now for 4 years, or going on 4 years. And I've been traveling across Canada with the message that Canada's north is a region whose time has come. 150 years ago, the message was, Go west, young man, go west. Now I think it is time for all Canadians to turn their eyes northward. The rationale for this message is that Canada's north has become the focus of a complex set of domestic and international geopolitical forces, and that all Canadians need to pay attention. I firmly believe that our ability as a country to tackle these forces rests in large part with our ability to rebuild healthy families and communities in the north, and not simply focus on military and transportation infrastructure in a push to assert sovereignty. How can we do this? The reason why I talked about some of the problems that we are facing, and I don't always like to talk about problems because I'm a fairly optimistic person facing problems. Sometimes it's difficult to try and portray something that is moving towards being positive by talking about the problems all the time. But it's necessary to do that just to have the context of where we've been and where we're coming from. So my question was, how can we do this? The reality that exists in many of our Arctic communities, I think, calls into question one of our core Canadian values: social justice. And yet this has not made it to the forefront of policy discussions. Inuit children have significantly lower educational outcomes than other Canadians. Our housing conditions remain well below the Canadian standards. Our health indicators continue to lag behind the rest of Canada. Substance abuse plagues our families and communities. The suicide rate is 11 times the Canadian average. And as we have learned this week, the tuberculosis rate among Inuit has risen 185 times the rate of a Canadian-born non-Aboriginals. Is this acceptable? Clearly not. I was in the House of Commons along with other Aboriginal leaders to receive the Prime Minister's apology for the horrors and systemic consequences of the residential school system. At the time, I cautioned that the legacy of this apology would be measured in the future actions of government. I have a vision for the Arctic and its peoples, and Inuit are a people. We have common memories, common bonds, common values, and a common history. We also have a common challenge. Until other Canadians understand and accept this, we will have not reached our most important objective: to be accepted as the Inuit of Canada with our rightful place as a founding and enduring people of Canada, with all that must come along with that understanding. In short, for Inuit to play a meaningful role in the economic development vision of the Canadian Arctic, it is critical to connect the dots between education, language, health, housing, and infrastructure. How do we do this? And where do we start? My belief is that the journey for preparing Inuit for the future must focus on building an education system based on Inuit culture and values. For many years now, I have been working to promote the needs and realities of the Arctic's children and youth. Without focused, responsible efforts, we are at the threshold of a social catastrophe. With such efforts, we can harness the enormous potential of our youth and direct it towards a positive outcome. At each and every event I attend across our country and overseas, I reflect on the challenges that lie ahead for Inuit. How, as leaders, do we clear the way for our children to participate in this rapidly changing world? Each time I reflect on this question, I return to our education systems and the need to put forces in place to get our kids into school, keep them there, and graduate them with skills to participate in society as an Inuk anywhere in the world. I traveled last year with Prime Minister Harper to Iqaluit. While there, he asked me a very simple question. He asked, why are most of the people I see working in jobs here non-Inuit? While nothing is simple in explaining the complexities of our modern world, one thing is certain: we are not graduating enough children from our schools or at a level equivalent to non-Aboriginal students. We as leaders of this generation owe it to the next generation to change this reality. When I was a young girl, the reality for parents was that sending a kid to school was the same as losing your child. Today, things are different. We must provide an opportunity for our children to become educated. If our kids are to move with confidence into the world, then they must be well-educated Inuit. In April of 2009, governments, ITK and regional Inuit organizations signed the Inuit Education Accord. This accord sets into motion a process to develop a national strategy on Inuit education to achieve educational outcomes for Inuit children comparable to all other Canadians without sacrificing our culture and language. This strategy seeks to develop a first-ever set of national goals for improving educational outcomes for Inuit. Our children need to receive an education that sets them up to take advantage of the many employment and professional opportunities that exist in the Arctic and elsewhere. With this process, we seek to define the solutions ourselves. We will transform the outcomes in our schools by working collaboratively and collectively as Inuit have always done. It is about defining what we want and imagining our future. The development of the strategy is part of a greater transition from the era of residential schools and assimilationist policies in education. It signals a new era of Inuit empowerment and determination to create an educational system that is founded upon Inuit language and culture, and that prepares Inuit to thrive in a rapidly changing world. So as we look north together, let's imagine a future where Inuit families and northern communities are thriving, where hospitals and offices are staffed by confident young Inuit embarking on careers, speaking their language, and proud of who they are. A place in our nation that we can all look with pride. Nakokmik tu sa kaina sitamani gun nasifsilu, une place de fierté de notre pays. Thank you very much.